I hear you suggest that you are not certain that you intend to do this process?
Well, yeah, what I wanted to say is that our main focus is that if the pandemic gives us opportunity, because as I said, we have been talking to the health experts and the other stakeholders. If in 2 months it goes down, that we argue that it's okay or it's safe for us, we can go ahead. And in view of that, we are procuring a lot of PPEs and the rest, so that if it subsides and we all agree that it has subsided, we are buying a lot of PPEs for our staff. We will do the sanitation. No, if you, I think 4 days ago, South Korea had an election, and if you monitored it, they use a lot of spacing or whatever. But what we are saying is that for
there are countries that have postponed their elections in the lockdown.
Yes, even in Africa. So if it subsides, the Electoral Commission is not taking decisions in isolation. We are in consultation with health experts and the rest. So we will not take a decision when they have not been advised to do so.
Right.
And we want everybody to know that it's not that we are insensitive to the price. Because I myself will not be comfortable, any of my regions or myself, being infested. You understand? So we are taking all the precautions that we want to take. But the case is that if in 2 months' time, it will be stress on us, but we can still compare the register. If that one fails, then people we will look at the. We have done a lot of research work, and we have some paper to that effect.
Okay.
And what we are saying in that case, we may use the old register, but that also means that we need to do some cleaning. We need to do some validation.
Okay, so you just preempted my next question there. You are saying that there's a possibility you will use the present register.
And with some validation, cleaning, and the rest. And that will also mean maybe amending the law. Because if you are to do the validation, what it will mean is that it should be compulsory exhibition. If you don't go for validation, your name should be deleted. And in that case, we will have to amend the law. So, and if you are talking of doing the validation, to mean that people will also come in, so human contact will still be there.
We are not in normal times, as you may have heard the president say.
Yes.
So why are you not rather focusing on this alternative?
Yes, I'm saying that if the alternative also means limited registration and validation, which also brings human contact, right? So there's no way, whether new or old, you can avoid human contact.
I see. You're welcome back. And you just heard Dr. Srebor Kweku, who is director at the Electoral Commission, and he spoke to us on the 18th of April at a time when they seemed not to have been too sure if they would go ahead with the registration exercise for a new voters register. But as you know now, the EC is set. Actually, this week, it conducted a pilot to test its systems and has issued a statement in which it says that the process was very successful, except in the Western region where there was some hitch at the start. Otherwise, everything has been smooth sailing. So it is ready to register about or more than 13 million Ghanaians. Earlier, the suggestions were that the EC was expecting to register some, 18, 17 or so. It says it is looking to register 13 million plus Ghanaians. It is hoping that it will use one of the BVDs or the systems for the registration process to register at each point for each day about 100 people. And in the process, in 21 days, it would have achieved the numbers that it is expecting. Right. So let's get back to this issue. And I must announce that the EC, my production, had made attempts to get the Electoral Commission to be represented for this discussion. Unfortunately, they have been unresponsive. So we will continue. It's a bit unfortunate, but sometimes it does appear that holders of public office do not seem to appreciate that they have a constitutional duty fundamental to the citizens to give them information and to be explaining the decisions that they take on platforms such as these, which are for the entire nation, so to speak. All right, anyway, we'll go ahead. Now, on the 18th of April, you were in the studio, and Kofi Abuchi and also H. Kwesi Prempeh were on Zoom when we discussed the voters register issue.
It's a pet course of mine.
Right. And I remember that we spoke to you partly as representing the over 24 CSOs that were against the new voters register. Among the reasons you gave at the time, you said that because of the pandemic, the procedures will become lengthy because you need to undergo the various measures, sanitizing, spacing, among others. And therefore, minimum, it will take 70 days for the EC to complete the exercise to capture the number of people that it was expecting to do. You also stated that we're 8 months behind schedule. That 60%, you suspected that you said it was extremely suspect that the EC didn't want to include the voters register, the voters ID card as an identification document, and that the cases in court, you had information, or your bioanalysis, there will be some 60% in favor that it might get some success. Then, very importantly, you said there is research, including by John Jacobs, that shows that putting your finger, on the machines, the scanners, significantly elevates the possibility of transmission of the virus. These haven't changed, have they?
No.
The EC, now we know, is going ahead. So
and they didn't show up, right? Just as they didn't show up when the National House of Chiefs called them. Now, we have a EC, and people blame the political parties for this. But if you look carefully, all the political parties have remained very consistent in their demands as far as the register matters are concerned for more than a decade. The MPP is still litigating Abu Ramadan 1, 2, and 3. That's what they are doing. They claim that they made in Abu Ramadan 1, wanting the old voter ID card to be struck out, wanting the register to be recompiled, is the same position that they've held. The NDC continues to maintain its position of wanting the register to remain as it is, etc. The only organization that has flip-flopped at every turn is the EC. And let's be very candid. This is not about specific individuals in the EC. It is an institution that, as at presently constituted, and as has been historically constituted, is not very fit for purpose. And the reason I say this is very simple. Go and read the allegations surrounding the EC's conduct during the Ramadan episode, the Abu Ramadan Evans Nimakon Kwesi Danso episode. You will recognize that someone who is not a very high official in the presidency said he had recordings of 2 EC deputy chairpersons, Sulamadu and Georgina Amankwa, where it was evident that they were lying blatantly during a court process where, under oath they were expected to speak the truth during discovery. They were lying about the fact that NHIS data existed. So they initially said they didn't have the NHS data, and then when the court compelled them, it turned out they actually had the NHIS data because they could go to the Form 1As or the Form 1Cs and reproduce that data. It is the same EC that looked all of us in the eye, the entire country in the eye, and said that since 2011, it has not updated any of its biometric equipment. You saw that, right? You were in the press. You saw that information distributed to a wide range of stakeholders and citizens. It turns out that that was not only manifestly false, but it was blatantly designed to mislead the country into giving them tens of millions of dollars of our hard-earned money to procure equipment that we don't need. So we have an EC that by its conduct, historically, different political parties, except when they are in office and therefore they are somewhat insulated, have shown to have problems with candor. Now you mentioned that the situation has not changed, and what are we going to do? Let me make it very clear that Imani and organizations like Imani, that, the CSOs and the rest that are campaigning about this issue, operate in the realm of ideas. When it comes to pure power plays, we have absolutely no standard. We don't have the means to force the US. In fact, sometimes we don't even have the resources. Some people have said that why don't we take to the court? They cost money. We often don't get donations from the public. We don't have the muscle to take the EC on when it comes to matters of authority and matters of power. What we have are the powers of ideas, the power to analyze, the power to use reason to compel the public to see things for what they are, and to say that the moral principles upon which this organization called Ghana, this corporate body called Ghana, was founded, will be defended by some of us as far as we have breath in our nostrils and as far as we have blood in our veins. That's all we have.
Let's take some issues one by one. After its exercise that it did, it says it used to test its equipment, the BVRs, which it has used in this system. It says that it is looking to register 100 people per kit over 21 days in all the 16 regions, and is going to have 13 million plus expected voters on the roll. You have suggested that we had run out of time, and also because of the protocols, the COVID-19 protocols that have to be followed before you get into a queue and go through a registration process, minimum, the EC needed 70 days.
So the EC information that I have seen suggests that they intend to take 40 days. I think you have seen information that says 21 days.
Yes.
It's this type of inconsistencies that I often complain about. But let's assume, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and say it's 40 days. There is very well established literature on what we call queuing theory. If you have people in a restaurant and they are in a queue, how long do you need to structure your processes in order to make sure that you don't create bottlenecks? So if you think of companies like McDonald's, Burger King and the rest, they actually build these processes into their systems and their supply chain to make sure that when you go into a McDonald's or a Burger King shop, you don't spend, or restaurant, you don't spend any time more than a particular number of minutes. If we look at the EC and what they intend to do, we have enough data in terms of the process and how it's designed, the parallel streams, etc., that we can use queuing theory, to specifically model exactly what the process is going to be like. And the pilot vindicated us. Let me give you an example. If you apply Elan, right, and you model the EC's processes, the number of stations, you move from one, you go to the other, how many of them, the rest of it. It is not mathematically possible to use 40 days to reproduce the register. Now they concede that when they say that they intend to register 30 million instead of the 70 million that is currently on the register.
Okay, I need to, for example, in that statement, I may have misconstrued it. They say that we are to register over 100 registered applicants per kit per day, as was attained by some regions during the pilot. In the pilot, they got in excess of 100, registrations in a day. It was only in the Western region that they had, I think, 70 plus for a day because there was a problem.
It's all fundamentally on sound modeling.
They say at that level of performance and with the continued enthusiastic participation of the Ghanaian public, the Commission is confident of registering some 13 million plus applicants within the first 21 days of the mass registration exercise.
Okay, so they intend then to register the 17 million.
Right.
We do our numbers, we do our modeling using Elang. And as I said, queuing theory is a very well-established domain. And it will be very difficult within that period without extensive mopping up, which often they've done. Even the 40 days in the past have not been the it, right? They've gone back and done mopping up several times. So in the 40 days, they will not be able to register more than 12 million people. Not possible. Why? Because even in normal times, they've had to do mopping up in order to get to that 60 million, etc. that we're looking at. Don't forget, they never got 60 million at one go. They did a registration that took them to about 40 million, 50 million, thereabout. And then they've done subsequent revisions, which have increased the number. And we all know they're not removing enough dead people from the register, which we'll come to. So some of that dynamic means that if you're doing an actual enrollment, and you're looking at something in the region of 16 million, it's not possible to do it within 40 days under normal circumstances. Secondly, the new procedures that they've implemented, we have now tested them at the pilot, and here are the results. We told them that when you use alcohol, and don't forget, it's a 60% alcohol solution minimum, sometimes up to 80%.
Yeah.
If you use alcohol on the scanners, most manufacturers say that that voids your warranty. How did that turn out in Ho, in Western Region and the rest? Our scouts report that unless the alcohol dries, you have difficulty with enrollment, which is exactly what the data predicts. So people who think that's all much.
So let's get people to appreciate this. For every person who puts their finger on the machine, after that, they need to wipe
sanitize it. Yeah.
And by wiping it, you have said at the last time that by wiping it, what they are doing, they are reducing the sensitivity. And these scanners are supposed to be super sensitive.
Indeed.
And this can cause interruptions.
Because it's pressure potentials. And those potentials on your fingertip and the rest of it has an effect on the dielectric potential of the device, the scanning surface.
And beyond voiding the warranty, you are saying that once they wipe it, you need to wait for a while.
So what I'm saying is that one, they have not gone back to the manufacturers of these devices to revise the contracts in which the use to which they're going to put that machine involve the implementation of these radical measures, including putting alcohol on a sensitive screen continuously. Secondly, we know from the research, the literature, that when you do that, you reduce the sensitivity of the screen. That's theory, right? And I'm saying that during the piloting, we sent scouts who established that when the fluid is still on there, they have difficulties with enrollment. Now, what that means, therefore, is they have to wait for it to dry, which is what they started to do, and then they had recoveries. We also know for a fact that the devices that they are using have worse battery life in some instances than the ones before. When you look at the 12 March 2016 piloting, the results were better than this time around. We've had 4 years since then. The purported claims of improvement that the EC had used to justify the spending of tens of millions of dollars have not materialized. One, the failure rate was 3 regions out of 16, right? That is somewhat in the region of 18% failure rate for a pilot. Very dangerous. In 2016, the failure rate was less for the pilot in March 2016. Secondly, now that you've had this problem, where we know that there are defects in some of the battery components of the laptops and the rest of it, you're going to have to assure us that we're not going to have some of these
When you
problems.
said failure rates in 3 regions, are you referring to this pilot?
Yes. They had failure rates in Volta, some failure rates in Central, though not reported.
They say the exercise went on smoothly at all the designated centers.
It's not possible
except in the Western region, where the BVR kits developed a fault on the second day.
We also had a Volta region incident in one of the days. We also know that in Central region, though not reported, there were some problems in some stations, which caused delays.
That notwithstanding.
So failure rate analysis, one quick point. Failure rate analysis, where you go into polling stations and you look at how often do machines break out. It's actually very developed in Ghana. Codeo is almost a world expert in tracking this. They've been looking at data on failure rates and collecting post-registration information for many years. CDD is actually a world expert in this area as well. Imani does not do a lot of electoral work, but because of this matter, we've been looking at the data that these other organizations that are experts in that area have been publishing, and I assure you that the EC's claims are just not warranted.
Nonetheless, in this pilot, in the Bono region, they had 141. In the Savannah, 128. In Ahafo, 189. Central, 140. So if you check through, they are getting in excess of what they had targeted as a standard, 100 people per kit. And they have done all of this, and they are using this to project that within the first 21 days, when they start to do it, they could register, or they would register in excess of 13 million. So the 70 days minimum that you project is not what they need.
Well, so one, it's very weak statistical analysis, because what you've done is that you've done a sample. What was it, 100 or so sample points, data points? And then you have a population that we're talking about, what, in excess of 30,000 polling stations. When you do your sampling, we look at your confidence interval, we look at your p-values, etc., in order to be able to make statistical conclusions. In that domain, they are not the experts, you know. So we have to be very careful in this country when we make things like, oh, what do you know about elections, etc., because some of these things are highly multidisciplinary, and very few people are experts. In fact, nobody is an expert in every dimension of it. One fact is clear. During a limited registration, during a piloting, the pressures on you as the person leading that pilot is so much more limited. The variety of conditions that could arise is so much more limited that elementary probability theory should expect that you get almost no glitches. When you start to get nearly 18% glitches, you have to start running for the hills. That's literally the truth. Why? Because look, the amount of work that you've put on these devices is less than what you're going to do during the real registration. Two, the amount of pressure that you're going to be putting on electoral officers, which will lead to mistakes, is far less. Three, the degree to which the political parties are going to step up their vigilance to challenge every voter who comes in and they think they're not the right person, to do all manner of things will all slow things down. The degree to which, by sheer distribution analysis, pure probability, as you increase the number, you convert to a certain central tendency of failures. And so once we start to know what is that rough mean, what is that rough average, we can predict that you're going to have at least 15% failure rate in polling stations. Okay. When you're talking of 30,000, 30,000, you're talking of almost 5,000 flashpoints. If the EC had built consensus towards this process, if the EC had worked with civil society, with chiefs, etc., anybody who's tried to work with them to do more confidence building than the rest, it is very likely that any time there is a failure, tempers will be much lower. Okay. Now we're going to see political party agents fighting in these locations, etc. So what I'm saying is that the period that they've given, when in the best of times, 40 days is what you need. Now we're in the worst of times. You cannot use 40 days, period.
Let's look at this issue, and then I'll bring in Mr. Abuchi, because he will help us to also deal with the questions of law, more particularly the constitutional perspective about the fears of potential, disenfranchisement of some people. The NDC had made the argument that you had less than 2 million persons of the age of voting who have passports. And then you have less than 7 million who have the NIA cards. Their suspicion was that as many as 10 million people were likely to be disenfranchised if the 18 million is a target for the registration. So that they said that the coverage of the NIA in getting the near 7 million people did not favor strongholds of the NDC. Now we know the NIA that they are going to, from the 8th of this month, in 2 weeks' time, by the 16th of this month, they would have issued an extra number of the cards that were not issued. They have printed 10,900,000 plus. They are yet to print 90,000 plus. They have issued 7 million, and they have printed but not issued almost 4 million. They are hoping to finish all of this. What that brings us to is that we have nearly in excess of 11 million that they would have issued by the 16th of this month.
And they also say that they're going to recommence registration between 8th and 18th, right? On the 18th. So the assumption being that you will get more cards.
Yes.
So several issues come up, right? One of them is that you're not taking into account the adjudication processes, which could still be challenged. Some of those adjudication processes are incomplete. I'm quite surprised that the NIA makes no mention of that fact. A lot of the people that were withheld, a lot of the cars, sorry, that were withheld were not withheld purely because they hadn't printed them, they had a backlog. Some of those cars were withheld because you had adjudication issues.
The adjudication will affect only 11,000 cards.
Well, in the previous situations, they had way more. So I don't know how they reduced it to 11,000, but that's fine. Let's even give them the benefit of the doubt and say the logistical distribution of these 3-point-something million will be able to occur in the next few days or whatever, so that you have 10 million people with the cards. Statistically, it's not as rigorous because you know for a fact that you have overlapping, people that have overlapping identities, in the sense that you have multiple, not overlapping identities, but overlapping identity cards. So there are people that, you know, they have the passport, they have the national ID card, they have other ID cards as well. So the fact that you have 10 million doesn't mean that the people that before this exercise was conducted did not have any ID card, their numbers have gone down by the same margin. You get my point? Because some of the people that have gone for these cards will have other cards as well.
Your earlier point was that you have in excess of 60% of people of the voting age who have the ID card, the current voter's ID card, as their primary identification.
Yeah, because that's what they've used historically.
Right.
When you looked at the data, people that have ID card, who have used ID card as a primary means of identification during elections, so about 60% of the total electorate.
Okay.
Now the argument they are making is, oh, look at the number of people who now have the card. If you take it in total, it's about 55%, whatever, of the entire, or maybe even 60%, depending on how well you go. But let's be more rigorous and say about 55% of the total number of people now have the card. So doesn't that invalidate the 60%? And I'm saying no. Because a lot of people that have the cards are holding overlapping cards. So it doesn't mean that the people that don't have any other means of identification, the majority of them now have
the argument is also that once the NIA is able to issue this many numbers of cards, you have a lot more people who can vouch for others, because the new law provides the opportunity for as many as, how many now is it about, for as many as one person to vouch for as many as, is it 10 people, right? So you have so many people who can vouch for others who don't have the passport and who don't have the NIA cards.
So 3 reasons. One is that the vouching process, the guarantee form, is a contingent right that they are giving to voters. There are ways in which that right could fall, whether because, you know, the form is refused, whether because you can't find someone who is willing to vouch for you, or somebody vouches for you claiming to be a registered voter, but you don't have any means of checking. And it turns out the person is not a registered voter. There are like 5 different failure points of that guarantee card. You get my point? Or that guarantee form. So for that reason, it's not a perfect substitute for having a definite right to register. You get me? Now, secondly, we now have a situation where the people, the judges that are currently sitting on this specific issue of whether or not this card can be retired. The people that are sitting on there are experts in this matter. There are 3 judges who have sat in every one of the Ramadan cases. Justice Bafo-Bone, Justice Badagbe, and Justice Doche. Justice Tanin Yebo, I think, has sat on 2. So we have at the very least 4 experts on this matter. And we know the ruling in Abu Ramadan 1 was emphatic. It was that the NPP went to court asking the court to invalidate the previous or the existing voter ID card on the basis that that existing voter ID card would be redundant because that person will already be registered, so you couldn't use it again. The court refused. And the court was not only emphatic about refusing it, the court asserted that that particular card is the best prima facie evidence of someone's ability to vote. Now we know for a fact that last year, this organization called the EC registered 1 million and more people and then gave them the same card, right? Saying that at that time in the law that was enforced, they are legitimate electors in this country. To now say through an act, a regulation that you intend to pass through Parliament, that those people somehow could not have registered and should not have registered because you intend to make it more credible, meaning that the previous forms of identification were not credible, it's not going to meet the constitutional bar. That is very, very clear from the record. What does all this mean? This means that the likelihood that the court will overturn this order is even higher than before, now that we know how they intend to go for it.
The court is asking them to provide legal justification, not factual justification.
Yes, but legal justification will
they are supposed to come and state the legal basis, the and we'll ask Abochi to explain that for us, so that you mention the courts.
But what is the best legal basis we have apart from the jurisprudence?
Okay.
What the judges have said in this matter is one of our best bodies of law.
This is what they said. They said, quote, the critical requirements which are clearly stated on the old voter registration card include the age and citizenship status of the applicant. It may indeed be legitimately argued that for all practical purposes, the old voter card is the best prima facie evidence of an applicant's eligibility under CI 72. Certainly, if the holder were not qualified for registration as a voter, how did he or she come by a voter registration card under CI 12? The law then enforced. And this is the quotation that he refers to by Chief Justice Georgina Wood in the Abu Ramadan and the Vance Nemako Kwesi Dansue Champong versus the Electoral Commission case.
But
let me bring in...
Actually, 1 minute. It goes beyond that. When you take the sum of the reasoning in that judgment, it's not merely that this card is important, but it's important also because in the law that was then in operation, they were legally acquired.
Right.
So these are rights legally acquired.
But you have heard the same Electoral Commission, even under Afarijan, talk about how our voters register was problematic because you had people who don't have to be there.
That's why I said that everybody
so
should...
if you are going to do a new voters register and you want a credible one, why do you want to use what has been faulted as a part of the new product?
That is why I think everybody should take time and read the first Abu Ramadan judgment. It's actually the more profound of the three. It states that even though the court at that time accepted that the register was not credible or accurate, even though the court accepted that, it does not meet the constitutional bar of disenfranchisement.
Okay.
This is an extremely high bar to meet.
All right. Mr. Abochi, are you with us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Great. You're welcome back. This is Newsfile. Certainly, definitely, your most authoritative news analysis platform. And once again, very privileged to have Bright Simmons, who has been with me in the studio for a while now. And Dean Abochi Kofi Abochi is on Zoom. So let's hear, Bright, you wanted to make some quick intervention when Abochi was making his presentation.
Oh, no, that's past. I think he's dealt with it. But I feel that we're not saying, I mean, civil society has had a concern about the register as well. I mean, the issues around the credibility of specific forms of identification. During that period, there was no civil society attitude or posture that those things didn't matter.
Okay.
The issue has now considerably evolved. Now, one, this is the EC that continuously violates the law when it can hide behind this issue of lack of consensus. You mentioned ROPAL as an example, where for many years they refused just to implement the law simply because they said they couldn't get consensus, and then later it was resources. The issues of continuous registration, which we've hinted at in this studio at least 3 times already, the EC continues to violate the law because it says it cannot get consensus, right? Now the problem is that when it suits it, it says that the lack of consensus is sufficient reason not to act within the law. When it does not suit it, it says, no, we don't need consensus. We have authority to do whatever we want. This is very interesting. We also know for a fact that this is the same EC that says if you lose your card, you can pay money and get a new card.
Right.
You don't have to go and re-register because you lost your card.
Yeah, that's done.
Right? Now for the same EC to say that, oh, yeah, you have the card. When you lose it, I'll charge you money and give you a new one. But now I'm going to do a new register. It's a different regime. You can't use the same card again. It makes no sense. This is obvious and patent.
But when you look at what they are seeking to do,
in CI 126,
do you see safety nets or measures to ensure that we don't come back to this argument again, where once they have the register, we don't come back to we must throw the cards away and do everything all over again?
You see, the Constitution doesn't really care about cards. This problem is uncannily similar to what we had in Ahuma Kanse. I don't know if you remember Ahuma Kanse.
Yeah, Ahuma Kanse, yeah.
And in Ahuma Kanse about the prisoners' rights.
Yeah, prisoners.
When the issue around non-recognition of residency came, it is almost identical to recognition of certain types of identification. They said that they don't recognize the prison as a place of residence. And because they don't recognize the prison as a place of residence, you can't vote there. Yeah. You saw the way the court dealt with it. It is the same way they are saying that we don't recognize the voter ID and the national driver's license as forms of identification. To my mind, the issue turns on that.
It's in that case that the court said this voter right is a human right.
Indeed.
Yeah.
And it's a human right of very high caliber.
Yes.
Now, when you say that we don't recognize a particular form of identification as valid, but just a few months ago, you not only have registered people and issued them a bunch of it, but people that had lost it had, by virtue that they previously had it, been allowed to get a new one to allow them to vote. You get my point? So it appears as if the EC is not paying attention to the fact that once I accrue the right by having my name in the register, you cannot arbitrarily remove that name.
No, but the question I was asking you is not about the law. It's about what they are seeking to do now, which it does appear they will go ahead unless the court decides otherwise.
No, it's about the philosophy.
Is it a system that will not lead us to this another day like this, where we will say the register has problems, we need to clean it up, the register has problems, and so on and so forth?
But that question presupposes that the EC has given us a coherent reason why I want to do what they want to do. The EC has not. Remember that when the EC started this campaign, it said the reason they needed to redo everything else and let everybody register again is because the equipment they are using is faulty. And the reason why the equipment is faulty is because it's obsolete. And it's obsolete because since 2011 they haven't improved it. We have conclusively proven, using all the valid documentation that is necessary through evidence. Yeah? We've proven through evidence that that claim is incorrect.
Okay.
Now, given that they have not come back with any sound basis, in fact, the EC has not made the argument that the register as it is now is bloated. That has been the position of one particular party. They made no reasons at all. They've been no reasons at all. All they have said is that
Jan has made that point.
But it's not the current head of the EC, right?
It's the institution.
It's the institution, but the institution has not necessarily, by its posture, ever said that as far as they had the Justice Crab Commission report. And that Justice Crab Commission report, Justice Benin was very emphatic in saying that it was advisory. The EC has not gone ahead to implement it.
And you remember that also happened after Dr. Bawumia and the MPP had done their analysis and told us about almost 70% bloating in some parts of the voter region and so on.
In 2015, those of us in many of the civil society organizations, including MANI, had some sympathy for the MPP position, particularly because the EC was being so recalcitrant in not listening to them. We also felt that the argument that we needed to make sure that the register was valid because it's universal suffrage, one person, one vote. Yeah. Meaning that if you have a means in which you can vote multiple times and the rest of it, we invalidate that constitutional requirement. For that reason, we're very sympathetic. Our position, the only person or the only institution that has changed their posturing is the EC. Everybody has been very consistent in making the claims that they have been making. It's the EC that all of a sudden says that it wants to change the register and refuses to give a reason. Okay. And when the reasons that it gives fails to stand to scrutiny, it simply retreats into this sense of I'm not accountable to anybody.
Okay. Right. So we are almost at the end of this.
I have something to show. I don't know though if it is available.
Right. So
so I wanted to very quickly explain that. When you want to decide the way forward, which at some point I'm sure you're going to ask.
And those who don't have the benefit of the television, we are showing a slide, attitudes of key actors at the beginning of the public controversy.
This is to establish that, first, the position of most organizations have remained fairly stable. It's the EC that has flip-flopped and not given any basis. That's number one. Number two, if you could go to the second one, you now find that as we've evolved, and we now have a situation where we have an impasse. The MPP, as it currently, its position as it's currently known, is adamant that they want a new register, right? They know that if they allow the use of the old voter ID card, that wish cannot be held because it would simply reproduce the existing register. The NDC, as they currently stand, are completely opposed to the new register. We are proposed, given that distribution of opinions, that a potential compromise, if you can roll forward.
Yeah, potential compromise to do limited cleaning up. Yeah.
You can do a situation where you use the same validation requirements that were presented in the Abu Ramadan 1 case, where the court said that you couldn't use an alien process, but if you could use the existing exhibition and challenge process, that's fine. We could elaborately improve that process in order to remove some of the names that may be an issue.
Okay.
Right. We can also Clearly, because the EC may say that we've already signed a contract and we've got equipment and the likes of it, we could still buy some equipment, but we can buy a far fewer number than the 8,000 and 82,000 they want to buy and throw away the existing 70,000 BVDs and 7,000 or so BVRs. We could say that, okay, Thales or whoever you are, Neurotechnology, all of these companies, we're not going to buy as many as we initially planned to buy. Can we stagger it over a period of time? Why is that reasonable? It's reasonable because we will increase the polling stations. So those new equipment could be used in the future. Thirdly, it is important to recognize that for a court to go against a jurisprudence of 30 years about right of proof of identification for rights that are well accrued is highly unlikely. Therefore, backing down on that point is actually strategic because it makes the EC look reasonable when in fact it shouldn't have at all assumed to have the powers to do this. And then lastly, we don't have the time. If you look at people that have understood our electoral process properly, they will tell you that from registration to the closure of addition of new names, which must happen 2 months to voting. So around October 7th, we must put a bar in terms of adding new names. You need 86 days in between. It means that if the registration processes go beyond July 10th, we are at huge risk of endangering the entire electoral time calendar. The argument that is being made is that they simply do not have what it takes to do a 40-day registration and an inevitable mopping up exercise, because even in those days when they didn't have these restrictions, they've had to do mopping up. They simply cannot fit that process into the timeline that remains. So they must do a limited registration because far fewer people and for a shorter period of time. Those are the grand positions that we believe enables us to reach a compromise that satisfies as many of the actors as possible.
Okay. Thank you very much.